March 9, 1973. 11:23 a.m. The 32nd Precinct, West 135 Street, Harlem, New York. Frank Lucas walks through the front door of the police station carrying a brown leather briefcase. Inside that briefcase, 10 kilograms of pure heroin. Street value, $1.2 million. Enough evidence to put Frank away for life. Every cop in the building knows who Frank Lucas is. Every detective on the narcotics squad has his photograph pinned to their wall. The FBI has been tracking him for 18 months, and Frank Lucas just walked into a police station with enough drugs to execute himself. The desk sergeant looks up, makes eye contact. Frank doesn't break stride. He walks past the front desk, past 3 uniformed officers, down the hallway toward the detective bureau. Nobody stops him. Nobody asks questions. Nobody draws a weapon. Frank reaches the third door on the left, Detective Richie Roberts' office. He knocks twice. The door opens. Richie Roberts stands there, white, Irish, 32 years old, narcotics detective for 6 years, known throughout the NYPD for 2 things. He's the best investigator in the department, and he's the only cop in New York who doesn't take bribes. Frank lifts the briefcase. "We need to talk," Frank says. Richie Roberts steps aside. Frank walks in. The door closes. What happened in that office over the next 47 minutes would destroy 75% of the narcotics division, bring down 52 corrupt cops, and change how the NYPD investigated organized crime forever. But to understand why Frank Lucas walked into that police station with 10 kilos of heroin, you need to understand the one thing Frank feared more than prison: betrayal. 2 months earlier, January 14th, 1973. Frank Lucas sat in the back of his Mercedes-Benz on Lenox Avenue. His driver, a man named Curtis, waited behind the wheel. Frank was reading the New York Times, an article about the French Connection case, the largest heroin bust in American history. 546 pounds of heroin seized, dozens of arrests, the Turkish and French supply chains completely dismantled. Frank set down the newspaper and smiled. The French Connection bust was good for Frank's business. With the European heroin routes destroyed, the Italian Mafia was scrambling for supply. Prices were spiking. Product quality was dropping. Desperation was setting in. Frank Lucas, meanwhile, had unlimited access to the Golden Triangle. His supply chain ran directly from Thailand through Vietnam to military transport flights landing at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. No middlemen. No French chemists, no Turkish smugglers, just Frank and his contacts in Southeast Asia. While the Italians struggled, Frank thrived, but success created problems. By early 1973, Frank Lucas was moving 300 kilos per month through Harlem, Newark, the Bronx, and Philadelphia. He employed over 100 people. His organization grossed approximately $40 million per year. He paid tribute to the 5 families, $3 million annually, which kept the mafia off his back. He owned legitimate businesses, real estate, nightclubs. He drove expensive cars and wore custom suits. Frank Lucas had become too visible, and visibility attracted attention. The NYPD had created a special task force specifically targeting Frank's organization, 30 detectives working full-time. Wiretaps on 43 phone lines, surveillance teams following Frank's dealers, undercover officers attempting to infiltrate his crew. But the task force had a problem. 3 years of investigation had produced 0 arrests. Every time they got close, evidence disappeared. Witnesses recanted. Search warrants came back empty. Informants vanished. The reason was simple. Frank Lucas owned half the cops investigating him. Detective Lieutenant Jack Toback, head of the Special Narcotics Task Force, was on Frank's payroll at $5,000 per month. He fed Frank information about upcoming raids, undercover operations, and confidential informants. When the task force planned to hit one of Frank's cutting houses, Toback would warn Frank 24 hours in advance. Frank would clear the location. The raid would find nothing. Detective Vincent Albano, Toback's second-in-command, received $3,000 per month. He provided Frank with copies of surveillance reports and wiretap transcripts. Altogether, Frank paid 32 NYPD officers across multiple precincts, detectives, sergeants, lieutenants, even one captain. The total monthly cost, $68,000. But that $68,000 bought Frank something priceless, immunity. Or so Frank thought. On January 22nd, 1973, 8 days after Frank read that newspaper article, something changed. Frank received a phone call from Detective Toback. "We need to meet," Toback said. His voice sounded tense, worried. They met at a diner in Queens, neutral territory. Toback arrived 20 minutes late, which was unusual. Toback was always punctual. "There's a problem," Toback said after sitting down. "There's a detective asking questions. He's not part of the task force. He's working alone, and he's not on anybody's payroll." "Who?" Frank asked. "Richie Roberts." Frank had heard the name. Richie Roberts was a legend in the NYPD, but not for the usual reasons. Roberts was legendary because he was clean, completely clean. 2 years earlier, Roberts and his partner had found nearly $1 million in cash during a routine bust. They turned in every dollar, didn't pocket a single bill. That kind of honesty was so rare in the NYPD that Internal Affairs had investigated Roberts, suspecting he was setting up some elaborate scheme. They found nothing. Roberts was just honest. "What's he asking about?" Frank said. "Your supply chain," Toback replied. "He's been studying arrest patterns. He noticed that every major heroin dealer in Harlem buys from Italian suppliers, except your people. Your product is different. Pure. Cheaper. Roberts thinks you have a direct connection to Southeast Asia. He's been researching military transport flights from Vietnam. He's looking at customs records, cargo manifests. He's smart, Frank. Really smart. Can you shut him down? I can't touch him. He doesn't report to me. He's not assigned to the task force. He's doing this investigation on his own time. Technically, he's not even authorized to work this case. But if he finds something solid and takes it to the FBI, we've got a problem." Frank finished his coffee. "How much to buy him?" Toback shook his head. "You can't buy Roberts. People have tried. He doesn't take money. He doesn't take gifts. He doesn't take anything. The man is either stupid or a Boy Scout. Either way, he's dangerous." Frank thought for 11 seconds. "Find out everything about him. Family, friends, habits, weaknesses. Everybody has pressure points." Toback nodded and left. Over the next 3 weeks, Frank learned everything about Detective Richie Roberts. Born in the Bronx, father was a factory worker, mother was a teacher. Richie had put himself through John Jay College of Criminal Justice while working night shifts as a security guard. He joined the NYPD at 23, made detective at 26, the youngest in his academy class. He was now attending night school at Fordham Law School, studying to become a lawyer. Roberts was divorced, one son, age 7. He lived in a small apartment in Queens, drove a 10-year-old Chevrolet, ate lunch at cheap diners, had no expensive habits, no vices, no debts. He didn't gamble, didn't chase women, didn't drink heavily. His life was work, law school, and his son. Frank couldn't find a weakness. But Frank did discover something interesting. Roberts was obsessed with the Frank Lucas case. Roberts had been collecting information for 9 months. He had a wall in his apartment covered with photographs, maps, timelines, and notes. He had tracked Frank's dealers, identified suppliers, documented distribution patterns. Roberts had done what the entire Special Narcotics Task Force couldn't do in 3 years. He had mapped Frank's entire organization, and Roberts had figured out the military connection. He had obtained cargo manifests from Fort Bragg. He had interviewed soldiers returning from Vietnam. He had documented suspicious patterns in military transport flights. Roberts didn't have enough evidence for an arrest yet, but he was getting close. Frank made a decision. On March 6, 1973, 3 days before Frank would walk into that police station, Frank sent a message to Richie Roberts through an intermediary, a defense attorney named Morris Levy who knew both men. The message was simple. "Frank Lucas wants to talk. No wires, no witnesses, just you and him." Roberts' response came back within 2 hours. "My office. His choice when." That response told Frank everything he needed to know. Roberts wasn't afraid. Roberts wasn't going to set up a trap. Roberts was curious. And curious meant negotiable, maybe not with money, but with something else. Information. March 9th, 1973. 11:23 a.m. Back to where we started. Frank Lucas sitting in Richie Roberts' office, the brown leather briefcase on the desk between them. Richie Roberts hadn't opened it yet. He was studying Frank, measuring him. "You know what's in the briefcase?" Frank asked. "I can guess," Richie said. 10 kilos. Pure. Number 4 heroin from the Golden Triangle. 97% pure. Street value about $1.2 million after cutting and distribution. Richie leaned back in his chair. "Why are you here, Frank?" "Because you're not like the other cops." Meaning I can't buy you. I can't threaten you. I can't make you go away. So I'm here to make a deal. I don't make deals with drug dealers. "You'll make this one," Frank said. He opened the briefcase. 10 plastic-wrapped bricks of heroin, each marked with a blue stamp, Frank's signature blue magic brand. "This is evidence. Proof. Chain of custody directly from me to you. Enough to arrest me and convict me. I'm giving it to you." Richie stared at the heroin, then at Frank. "In exchange for what?" "I want immunity for my family. My wife, my brothers, my cousins. They don't get charged. They don't get arrested. They walk away clean. And you? I'll take the fall. I'll plead guilty. I'll do the time, but my family stays out of it." Richie was quiet for 18 seconds. "Why would you do that?" "Because the NYPD is corrupt," Frank said. "Half the cops in this building are on somebody's payroll. The Special Narcotics Task Force, I own the commanding officer. I own his second-in-command. I own desk sergeants, patrol officers, detectives. I've been paying cops for 5 years and not one of them has arrested me. You know why? Because they need me. I'm their retirement fund." "That doesn't explain why you're here." 3 weeks ago, one of your fellow detectives, Jack Toback, came to me. He told me you were investigating my operation. He offered to kill you for $50,000. Richie's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened slightly. "I turned him down," Frank continued. "Not because I'm a good person. I'm not. I've done terrible things. But I'm not stupid. Killing a cop brings heat. Federal heat. The kind of heat that shuts down entire operations. So instead, I started thinking, what does Richie Roberts want? He wants to make a case. A big case. The kind of case that makes careers. I can give you that case. The corruption case. 32 NYPD officers on my payroll. Names, badge numbers, amounts paid, dates, locations of meetings. Bank records showing deposits. Wiretap evidence. I recorded myself as insurance. Everything you need to bring down half the narcotics division." Richie stood up, walked to the window, looked out at Harlem. "Why now? You've been paying these cops for years. Why burn them now?" "Because the game is over," Frank said. "Nixon's war on drugs is escalating. The DEA launches next year. The FBI is creating joint task forces. The Italian families are under pressure from RICO prosecutions. The window is closing. I can see it. In 2 years, maybe 3, somebody's going to take me down. Might be you. Might be the feds. Might be a rival who flips. I'd rather control how it happens. And your family stays clean? My wife has never touched drugs. My younger brother Huey manages a nightclub. Legitimate business. My cousin James moved to Atlanta 2 years ago, runs car washes. Legal money. I want them protected. They don't deserve to go down with me." Richie turned around. "I need to make a call." He picked up the phone, dialed a number. "This is Detective Roberts. I need to speak with Assistant U.S. Attorney Sterling Johnson. It's urgent." The call lasted 9 minutes. Richie explained the situation, offered the deal, listened to the response. Hung up. "Johnson wants to meet with you," Richie said. "Tomorrow. Federal Plaza. You bring evidence. He brings an immunity agreement for your family. And the corrupt cops? If your evidence is solid, Johnson will prosecute. Federal charges, conspiracy, racketeering, corruption, most of them will do 10 to 20 years. Frank nodded slowly. "One more thing." "What?" Jack Toback offered to kill you. That offer doesn't expire just because I turned it down. Somebody else might pay him. Watch your back." Richie stared at Frank for a long moment. "Get out of my office." Frank stood, left the briefcase on the desk, walked out. March 10th, 1973, 9 a.m. Federal Plaza, Manhattan. Frank Lucas sat across from Assistant U.S. Attorney Sterling Johnson and 3 FBI agents. Richie Roberts sat in the corner, observing. For the next 6 hours, Frank provided testimony. He named every corrupt officer, detailed every payment, provided bank records, photographs, audio recordings, and written documentation. The evidence was devastating. On April 3, 1973, federal agents arrested 52 NYPD officers simultaneously. The arrests happened at 6:00 a.m. across the city. Detectives pulled from their homes in handcuffs. Lieutenants arrested in their offices. One captain arrested while eating breakfast with his family. Detective Jack Toback was arrested at his mistress's apartment in Brooklyn. During the arrest, he pulled a gun. FBI agents shot him 3 times. He survived but spent 8 months in the hospital before standing trial. The corruption scandal made national headlines. It was the largest police corruption case in New York history. 34 officers were convicted. 18 received sentences of 10 years or more. The NYPD disbanded the Special Narcotics Task Force and implemented new oversight procedures. And Frank Lucas? Frank was arrested on January 28, 1975. Not by corrupt cops, not by the NYPD, by Richie Roberts, working with a federal task force. They seized $570,000 in cash, 4 properties, and 3 vehicles. They charged Frank with operating a continuing criminal enterprise, drug trafficking, and racketeering. Frank pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 70 years in federal prison. But Frank had one final card to play. In 1977, Frank agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors. Over the next 3 years, Frank provided testimony that led to over 100 convictions. Drug dealers, corrupt officials, money launderers, and organized crime figures. Frank gave them everything. In exchange, his sentence was reduced to 15 years. He served 5 years and was released in 1981. His wife, Juliana, was never charged. His brother, Huey, was never charged. His cousin, James, was never charged. Frank had kept his family out of prison. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. In 1984, Frank Lucas was arrested again for attempting to restart his drug operation. He was convicted and sentenced to 7 more years. During the second prison term, Frank Lucas hired a lawyer to handle his appeal. That lawyer was Richie Roberts. By 1984, Richie Roberts had left the NYPD and passed the bar exam. He had become a defense attorney specializing in drug cases. And when Frank Lucas needed legal representation, he called the one cop who had never lied to him. Richie Roberts worked on Frank's case for 2 years. He couldn't get Frank released early, but he ensured Frank received fair treatment and proper credit for his cooperation. Frank Lucas was finally released from prison in 1991. He spent the next 28 years living quietly in New Jersey. He gave occasional interviews. He consulted on the 2007 film American Gangster, where Denzel Washington played Frank and Russell Crowe played Richie Roberts. Frank Lucas died on May 30th, 2019, at age 88. Richie Roberts continued practicing law until his retirement in 2018. He never spoke publicly about the details of his first meeting with Frank Lucas. When reporters asked what Frank had said in that office in 1973, Roberts always gave the same answer. Frank Lucas was a criminal, but he was a smart criminal. He knew when the game was over. The brown leather briefcase that Frank carried into the 32nd precinct that day, it's stored in an evidence locker at the DEA Museum in Arlington, Virginia. The heroin was destroyed decades ago, but the briefcase remains as a reminder of the day a drug kingpin walked into a police station and changed everything. Here's what nobody understood until years later. Frank Lucas didn't walk into that police station because he was caught. He walked in because he chose to. He could have run to Brazil or the Philippines or any of a dozen countries with no extradition treaty. He had the money. He had the connections. But Frank Lucas understood something that most criminals never learn. You can't outrun the inevitable. You can only choose how it ends. Frank chose to end it on his own terms, with his family protected, with his enemies destroyed, and with one honest cop who kept his word. That's not surrender. That's strategy. Subscribe for more untold stories of the criminals who rewrote the rules. Leave a comment. Would you trust a cop who couldn't be bought, or is everyone for sale at the right price?